The thing that I find hardest now is when I look back at time lost. Not at jail, not at violence or the use of drugs or the crime committed. No regrets there, I'm sorry to say, society. But my regrets, the soul destroying stuff that I feel, the stuff that keeps me awake at night, the stuff that makes me feel sad, is the time lost. You get your car back, you get your house back, you might be able to get the ex-missus back, you might be able to get your dog back from the pound, but you cannot get time back. Once it's spent, it's gone. I come from addiction, 20 years basically of drugs, anything that went up. I used to joke that sleeping was for dreamers. I didn't want to go down, I didn't want to numb everything out. I wanted to go out there 24/7 and party and ride motorbikes, and it all came from a sense of belonging or a lack of sense of belonging, you know. In 1972, when I was born, I was adopted out, and the mentality and the belief and the evidence that they had in 1972 was that baby was taken from mum at birth, no skin on skin touch, which is crucial, and I was put in a room and I was left there for about 2.5 weeks, and I was fed and I was changed, but I wasn't nurtured. And that first couple of weeks, in some people's opinion and some schools of thought, set me up for what I became. And I could never put my finger on it. And people would see me as the sociable person, but I just wanted to be by myself, you know. And I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And then this gang member moved in next door, and I'm at the kitchen window thinking, wow, you know, I want to get to know him. And he became one of my best friends. And instantly, the first moment I walked into the pad, I felt the sense of belonging that I'd never felt before in my life. And before long, what we now call, you know, secondary deviance kicked in. I started to dress like them, I started to look like them, I shaved my head like them, I grew facial hair like them, I talked like them. They became like my family. By about 26, 27, my septum had burnt out from putting too much speed up my nose. And by then, this new drug called methamphetamine came along. And so a friend of mine said, try this, it'll save your nostrils, it'll save your nose. So I started smoking it. And things went south pretty quick. Halfway through my journey, I had a daughter. And I can kind of remember the birth. I can remember the birth. I remember cutting that umbilical cord and holding her. But from then until 13 years old, I can't remember a lot. Everyone knew that on the 18th of August I would be at my daughter's. That was a no-brainer. No matter what's going on in my life, on the 18th of August I was at my daughter's. And there were years that was the only day I'd see her. So I went over to the Wairarapa and I knocked on her door, and she came to the door, and I gave her a card with money in it, because you don't go to the supermarket when you're a gangster, or you don't go to the warehouse, you know. So card full of money, and I still remember the card, and it had in pink and silver glitter, happy 10th birthday baby girl. And she looked at me and she said, Dad, I'm 13. I missed 3 years. Where did that go? So I joked and I said, you know, you'll always be my 10-year-old. And we laughed, and she, you know, and she said, you can come inside, but before you come inside, you have to ring Grandma. They've been looking for you for about 6 months. So I rang my mum on the doorstep, and Mum heard my voice and she just burst into tears. And I'd been up 4 or 5 days, and I broke down, and my daughter, who up until that moment had never seen her dad cry, you know, she looked at me like, what the hell's going on? You know, why is Dad breaking down? And I rang a friend the next day, and he came and picked up my bike and dropped off my car, and I went north, and I got clean. I came back to Wellington to pick up my cars and my bikes, and unbeknown to me, the person that owned the shed was a dealer. So I walked straight back into it. Different environment, different people, same ball game, but deeper. Within 2 months, I got myself out, and I went and stayed with a lady up the line. She had just split up with her husband that was a gang member. He was stalking her, she was scared. So I needed a place to stay, she needed protection, it just worked. I stayed with her and I got clean. And a friend stopped in, my tattooist stopped in. And it was a chance meeting, I hadn't seen him in quite some time, and he didn't know I was getting clean. He was trying to figure life out himself. He was trying to stay clean himself. So he offered me a job running his tattoo studio. You had to be clean to work in this tattoo shop. So that eliminated any triggers. People, places, things are the things that will bring you back to drugs. Your environment is absolutely everything. How good is your pack? That's the question that you've got to answer yourself. When I tried to get clean, my pack, my environment, my pack, they would come and drop drugs off to me to sell or to get rid of, or they'd come and use drugs with me. You know, I'll give up tomorrow, Hop. You know, give up next week, Hop. Stay with us, Hop. You know, they didn't want me to get well. They didn't want me to grow. They would try and hold me back. So I entered this tattoo shop. I learnt a new trade of body piercing that grew into body modification. I got to make punk rockers, metal mohawks, stretched ears, be creative, and I watched a team of tattooists be creative, and it was a happy environment, and it was a nurturing environment. They taught me how to talk, and not about gangs, and not about violence, not about drugs, but the art of conversation. They drew me a list of conversation points and taped it to the counter, so if someone walked in that I wasn't familiar with, a suit and tie for instance, then I'd look at my piece of paper and how are you today? And what do you do for a job? And I'd learned how to conversate. Soon after that, I think I'd been clean about 4 or 5 years. I started tattoo removal. I remember one client coming in and he had the spider web over half his face, and his hair, and his head always down, and his head always over his hair, always over his face. And I started removing the spider web, and then one day I was on the computer and this man came up to the counter, shirt, tie, short back and sides, and I said, can I help you, mate? And he looked at me and he said, Hop, it's Spider. And this man his spider web had gone. There were just very faint traces of it. It was his last session. And he had had a haircut and he had been promoted at work. And I felt this joy for him, that I played a part in helping him change his life. And it was there that I decided to become a counsellor. When I told the shop that I wanted to leave and become a drug counsellor and go to university and study towards a bachelor, they told me to leave my equipment behind, and they booked out 2 days a week where I could come and work in my space, and what I made was mine to help me get through university. The difference in PAC was phenomenal. These guys helped me become who I am today. The tattoo industry of Wellington helped me become who I am today. I was clean about 2 years, and I sat down with my daughter and I said to her, "Do you remember Dad 2 years ago, babe?" And she says, "Well, how can I forget?" And I explained to her that that was Dad on drugs and this is Dad off drugs. No point in me going through all of this and sheltering her from the truth and wondering why I wasn't around those years. Complete transparency, complete honesty. Let them learn from our mistakes. And what's more, it opens up the door to them owning their mistakes when something does go wrong, if they do try a substance, and it opens up the door to honesty and transparency. She made me what I am today. I'd never felt unconditional love until I had my daughter, but I never really felt it until I got clean. This poem spells it out for me, how I feel about the time lost. And so here it goes. If I'd known time would pass so quickly, I would have stayed at home and made a tent with you. We could have slept in it. I would have read to you more. We would have taken more walks. I would have pushed you for longer on the swings and let you sleep in my bed. I would have been softer. If I'd known I had you for such a short time, I'd never have told you to be quiet or to let me be or to go to bed now. You could have stayed awake with me. I would have taken more photographs. I would have walked slower and got up earlier and worked less. If I had known, I would have written more about you. If I'd known, if we had known. And that's what it's like for me.